Good afternoon. I have 20 minutes and 23 slides. Buckle up. I hope to challenge a few conventional ideas, I think, that we hold a bit too dear sometimes. This will tag on a little bit to the context around the Inspiration Project, why we created it, and what it is we hope to do with it. But I think also tag on to the narrative around the conversation that's been heard earlier by my very able and fellow dragons around what it is we need to do to move the state of the continent forward. I'm going to argue over the next few minutes that small business is a lie. And I'm going to argue over the next few minutes that not only is it a lie, but it's a lie that's been deliberately created to keep the majority of African people in abject poverty, in lack, without any semblance of creating real wealth for themselves and their families. What really concerns me is that we've romanticized this concept of small business. But ideas without numbers, statistics, and data are just that, ideas. So let's perhaps put a bit of context to what it is I will say. A good friend of mine started a fashion label. His name is One Dealer. His fashion label's name was Lokshan Culture. It's an interesting business with a great story and heritage behind it. But in the early days in South Africa, when the majority of the population, black African people, my people, were not able to afford real designer labels, when we didn't have the size of middle class we had today, there was an aspiration of people who wanted designer label look but couldn't quite afford it. One Dealer and his partner started a business called Lokshan Culture. Their business, by the way, was predated by some 10 years by Mr. Price. In his best year, they only did 80 million rand in turnover. Mr. Price has done significantly better. If you go to Alexander, there's a young man called Thibaut. Thibaut, by the way, is quite famous in the 4th section of Alexander, in a township in South Africa, by the way, the largest, it's the second largest, it's the third largest, I beg your pardon, but oldest township in South Africa. He has a kota business. For those of you who don't know what kota is, it's simple. It's bread, you cut it in half, a full loaf of bread, you cut it in half, you take the half portion, you cut that in half, and you take the innards of it, the soft part, remove it, and put anything you want in it, and use the soft part to close it. It is a quarter of the loaf, hence, God. Now I've educated you, comrades. You can go educate the world about it. But kotas are an institution. He's been running his business, by the way, he inherited from his grandfather, but he's been running it himself for the past 11 years. In his best year, which was in 2009, he did 53,000 rand turnover for the full year. There's a large conglomerate listed in South Africa called Famous Brands. They started a business to essentially do the same thing. They sell kotas. In their first year, they did 20 million rand in turnover. Same commodity, same customer base, radically different results. What's the problem? Are these anomalies? Well, they're not. What is a bank? I know you have them here in my country, we call them stokvels. My mother, to this day, belongs to 6 stokvels. I don't understand it because she's broke all the time. So I end up financing her living costs because she's taking her salary and investing it as capital expenditure on future promise of money she may or may not get. But if you think about what a bank is, it's nothing more than a collective group of people who come together with a promissory note that will put money together in a collective scheme, and when we need it at a future date, the money will be available, at the very least in principle, we hope for some growth in future. Sound familiar? Yeah, in the modern world, they call those things banks. Except what banks do is they get a depository license to raise deposits from you and I as the public. Then they take that money and go to you and I back as the public and then lend it to us at a rate far superior to the rate they pay the people who give them deposits. And the spread is the margin calls that banks live on, pay large expenses, and of course salaries to their people for. There is an iconic stokvel operating in the Eastern Cape called Siyangoba. It is iconic because it was formed in the village from which the father of our democracy, Nelson Mandela, comes from, in Qunu. It is iconic because one of his family members belonged to that stokvel. Siyangoba last year did 300,000 rand in collections. It was formed years predating ABSA, which today has 4 billion rand worth of net assets. What's the difference? The difference is that the thinking is wrong. So a lot of people watch the program, right? and came down on us hard, me particularly, because apparently I was the bad guy. I don't think so. The producers made me look like that because they edited out all the bits where Gil was actually being Gil. And I just want to say, Gil, from one Zulu to another Jew, I love you, brother. But I want my land back, please. Give us the land, please. Just. Right. So if you watch the program Dragon's Den, one of the things about which we were particularly disheartened was the quality of people who came to pitch to us. I would argue, and I have the privilege of doing business all over the continent, as does Gil and Pulu, by the way, that it's not a uniquely South African problem. The level at which our people are taught to think, create enterprise, and build businesses is the fundamental issue. I could say that, but again, it's just conjecture, right? So I thought what I would do, and this is an experiment because we haven't tried it technically, but I thought what I would do is maybe bring you some evidence of what it is I mean by this. Gents at the back, I need you to move the mouse. The mouse, it's a little thing that was created. You move it and it moves a little cursor on the screen. If you move that mouse to the screen, a little button will come up that looks like an arrow pointing forward. That's the play button. When I cue you, if you press that button, the most amazing thing's going to happen. The footage is going to roll. But we're going to try it in a minute. Give the gents at the back a round of applause. I'm going to show you two entrepreneurs. The first guy was my personal favorite. He insisted we call him Mr. President. Mr. President had what you might call a poop of an idea, but he believed in it. And so perhaps I should just show it to you. Watch this.
Good afternoon, Dragons.
Hi, how are you?
I'm from Joe Burger, CC. My name is Zitanda Emmanuel Mbala.
Your name
get
is?
that, don't worry, you can call me Mr. President. Zitanda Emmanuel Mbala.
Mr. President.
I'd like to grow a 1 million rands invested today in my business to be worth over 100 million US dollars by 31st December 2014. In exchange for 10% of stake in my business. I've invented this very powerful product which is about to change the world, not just for a season, but permanently. My product is a smart toilet paper lubricating device. To help you make sense of it, think of it as a BAM application.
BAM application?
There are applications for everything today. There's apps for almost everything, but there hasn't been one for the BAM. This one helps you wipe yourself effectively.
For what? Sorry,
it's an app that helps you wipe yourself. I want to see this.
Yeah, it's
no, then really? You can understand how
Did
this
you say
is funny, right?
A smart toilet
lubricating. Smart toilet paper lubricating device for effective wiping after using the bathroom. Because if you have used the restroom today after you left your house, you probably wiped with a dry toilet paper.
Let's have a look at it.
Absolutely. This is what it looks like. And it's been patented as such, as an application. What you see,
Turn it around.
Yeah, what you see here is a package of different items. All these items are to help harness or to monetize the opportunity. I studied the behavior of the human eye in relationship with the human anus. Nobody has ever conducted that
The
study.
human eye relationship
Absolutely.
with the human anus.
Absolutely.
Guys, I think, honestly, let's just get to the point here.
What I discovered is the fact that these two organs are equally intelligent as far as sensitivity is concerned. We have a deal locally and in the US, all right? Locally, the stores, the brand that we have a deal with, they have 140 stores.
I am, with your permission, going to skip the rest of it. But I think you get the essence of his idea. His entire thesis was that the eye is as intelligent as the anus. Now, I've not had empirical evidence to test this, but something suggests it's not true. But give it to him for creativity. He argued, having met us in the middle of the year, that less than 6 months later his business would be worth close on R1 billion, depending on whatever you use as an exchange rate at a point in time. Zitande is an interesting entrepreneur. One, because I think he's a chancer. But two, and perhaps more to the point, is that his thinking is wrong. To pull his entire thesis earlier, he's trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. And a lot of us, I think, spend time fixing problems that don't exist. So where I come from, my grandfather had a spaza shop. He was one of maybe 8 people on the road that had a spaza shop. And he did it as a form of sustenance to create a little bit of extra income for his family. Except, and here is the tragedy, my grandfather started his business in 1978, in July of 1978. In September of 1978, 4 entrepreneurs met in a small little farm town called Stellenbosch in South Africa and created a business not dissimilar to my grandfather's. Because if you think about what a spaza shop is, it's nothing more than a retailer. You buy stuff from people who make it, put it on the shelves so people want to buy it, and charge a margin for the value you add. Those 4 people, by the way, created a little business called ShopRite. When my grandfather died, he had one spaza shop. ShopRite today generated 114 billion rand worth of turnover in their last financial year. Same business, fundamentally different results. What's the problem? Solving a problem that doesn't exist. And so a part of the issue is we've been taught to think about businesses in small business thinking. So there are these stages of entrepreneurship, and I thought what we should do for the context of this conversation perhaps is to create a bit of a context around what are the various stages, in my view, of entrepreneurs. The first is the startup stage. Well, how do you know you're the startup stage? It's actually very simple. If you're the person creating the product, then branding it, then selling it, then meeting with a customer, then drawing up the invoice, then phoning the customer to collect on the invoice, and then going through the iterative process over and over again, you're at a startup stage. You're creating value and executing value all by yourself. There are intelligent ways to do this, by the way. If you hire somebody to assist you in the process, you're still at startup stage because you've not elevated your role in the business. Now, the issue is we've taught people, predominantly black African people, that that's what a business is. And that's the problem. Because they then get into the cycle of creating startups and they never migrate up the value chain. For those who think outside the box, they then create what we call survivalist businesses. This was my grandfather. So when I grew up, I started working in his shop. And then my siblings and I started working in a shop. And essentially what he'd done is it eliminated some of the roles he was performing and pushed them down to us. Some of the more rudimentary functions. Stock taking, for instance. I cannot tell you how many Christmases I spent stock taking. I don't know Father Christmas. For me, he was baked beans. 1,000 bloody times over. But they then create these survivalist businesses. And how do you know you're survivalist? Actually very simple. If you have less than 18 months worth of working cash flow in your business at a point in time, you're a survivalist. You don't have the benefit of long-term thinking and long-term thought and long-term process planning. You're in the business all day to make sure you can buy tomorrow. Survivalists. Then there are those who migrate a little bit up. We call them success entrepreneurs in our business. Other people call them lifestyle businesses. These are the guys who make money so they can show you that they make money. You know them because you can see it. It's the car they drive, the suit they wear, and the place they live in. And that's not wrong, except that the aspiration is wrong. They build and create value only to display wealth rather than to create intergenerational wealth and pass it down. I would argue, and I've just come back from Ghana. I'm in Nigeria next week. I spent a lot of time in the continent. I would argue this is the single cancer holding back Africa today. That her leaders are captured more by the image of success rather than by creating it and building value for her people. And then finally, and this is the special breed of entrepreneurs, the growth entrepreneurs. These are the guys who are eager to create the business. They delay their own gratification, fire themselves as often as possible, make themselves redundant to the processes of the business, and yet have the most uncanny eye for detail. Growth entrepreneurs. So, now that we know the various stages of entrepreneurs, what do we need for entrepreneurship to really work and succeed? Well, my view is we need 6 things in the ecosystem. The first thing that we need is we need to make sure that in the ecosystem there is enough infrastructure. This is a real serious problem in the continent. Well, just think about it. I have an office in London. You land in Heathrow, and between me moving from Heathrow to Holborn in the center of London, I don't lose internet connectivity. Because everywhere in the city I go, whether I walk in the streets or I'm in the subway or the underground, everywhere in the city I go, even on the very black cabs, there is internet provision. It sounds like a fancy idea, but what does internet buy you? Access. access to information, to communication. It buys you access to a heap of things happening in the world that you're cut off from at a point in time. We don't even have internet here right now, today. And because of the lack of infrastructure, people think infrastructure is roads, and yeah, that stuff is important too, but just the basic stuff. We don't then create high levels of entrepreneurs. Second, you need access to markets. Lebu spoke very ably about this, but it is true that until the entrepreneur can create a product and access markets with it, he's not going to move. In Ghana last week, I met a guy who makes bags. Fascinating, interesting business. Beautiful Ghana prints. My wife doesn't do the African print thing, but I bought her 3 bags for our 8th year anniversary. 8 years, I'm so proud of myself. I'm grown up, comrades. When you're 8 years, you're grown up now. Now we talk about real things. And so I bought my wife 3 of these, and she loved them. And she said, where can I buy them here? Can we import them? Can we bring them in? Because the issue for that entrepreneur is for him to access the South African market. And think about it. He's creating a Ghanaian print product in Ghana. Nobody needs it. There is no novelty for it in Ghana. But if you could get it into Champs-Élysées in France, if you could get it into Fifth Avenue in New York, if you could get it into Madison Square, if you could get it into the Gold Barrier Reef in Australia, he would move more product than he has the capacity to. He's just not able to access those markets. 3, we need to make sure that we have patient capital. Bull and I have argued about this. My view is entrepreneurs don't need cheap capital. It doesn't have to be inexpensive. It's great if it can be inexpensive. It does have to be patient. It must wait for me to get into a positive cash flow cycle and build a business so that once I've started repaying that debt, I don't withdraw too much cash flow from my operations that it ends up straining the underlying business. That's a real problem. Because we've then gone back to conventional finance institutions and we've said to them, you're not providing capital to entrepreneurs. Their business is not providing capital to entrepreneurs. The risk matrix for providing capital to entrepreneurs is fundamentally different to giving you and I a personal loan or a credit card. And so because of that, we have a mismatch between capital available in markets and capital entrepreneurs are able to get. 4th, we then need to make sure that each of these entrepreneurs can access not only the right kind of infrastructure, the right kind of market, get the right kind of capital, but I want to speak about the next 3 in conjunction. We need to make sure they can get the right people, and this is a real problem here. You heard it earlier said by Vinny, and it's a view I hold too. Good people don't start businesses in Africa. They join businesses, generally nice jobs, cushy office with air conditioning, and that's where they stay for 20 years. That's not wrong, except that that's not all they're capable of. So my argument here is that we need these 6 things. Do we have them? Well, I don't know. Because a part of the problem is we focus so much on risk, we've forgotten that risk is not the only thing we need to consider. Let me put it to you simply. Business is essentially about risk. And one of the things we found interesting in our Dragon's Den experience was how people came to pitch to us to raise funding, listen to this, for an idea. How dare you have the temerity, the unmitigating tenacity to think you can ask me to take my hard-earned money and finance your dreams? In what world is this? And that's what people do, right? Because they go, well, there's too much risk in my leaving my life, quitting my job, not earning an income, and starting a business. So I'll find these wealthy guys who have money to lose. You know why wealthy people are wealthy? Because they know how not to lose money. Do you ever notice how the stingiest person is always the one who's got food? It's just how it works. So when you go to wealthy people and pitch them, and I'm not saying I'm wealthy, that's more Buller's territory. I'm what you might call rich. You know the difference between rich and wealthy, right? Wealthy people sign checks for the rich ones. You get the joke later. Let's move on. But the point is that people have a vision of what they want to do, but they don't want to take the risk. Here is the thing, though, and I just want to put it in a simple matrix for you. You're going to have to take risk on the one end. You're going to try and do it for some sort of reward. Now, the only way to take the risk is if the vision is big enough. That's the only way you keep doing what you need to do. So instead of focusing on how big the risk is, what we should be doing is focusing on how grand the vision is. Just to put together the Inspiration Project, not only here in Namibia, but even in South Africa to talk to sponsors. When you write a mathematics exam in school, what happens? You get your scorecard, right? The scorecard tells you the percentage you got right. The teacher never comments on what you got right, she comments on what you got wrong. So from an early age, we're taught to see the decline side, the downside, the risk, rather than the opportunity in what we're doing right. If you do 6 subjects, you get 5 A's and you get 1 G. The teacher's scorecard for you is going to come back on the 1 G or double F that you got, not the 5 A's that you got, because we're in a system that looks rather for the risk than the opportunity and the upside. If this is true, and I'm arguing that it is, then what we need to do is make sure that as we build these 4 types of entrepreneurs, those who build businesses for lifestyle, build them for legacy, build them to sell them, and build them for philosophy, we provide them the right kind of risk with the right kind of vision. Lifestyle is what a lot of us here understand. It's the challenge that's holding back Africa now. People build businesses to live good lives rather than leave good legacies. One of my very good friends, by the way, is he and I grew up together, went to school together, a young Muslim young man. And his parents, his great-grandfather started a dry cleaner. His father started a hardware store, but inherited the dry cleaner. He then started a fast food joint, and now he owns a business that distributes airtime. The businesses of aforementioned he still has. He's got the hardware store, the dry cleaner, because in their system of thinking, legacy is more important than lifestyle. He drives a moderate car, he lives in a moderate place, but in his thinking, he's building a business for his children to take over and build the next tranche of that business. The next is people who build businesses to sell. This is essentially what Pulu does. Buys it at one price, creates value, sells it for a multiple. But finally, and this is what I'm arguing we need to do, build them for philosophy. What does that mean? We need to start building businesses that change the world. There's enough people standing in corners selling airtime, peanuts, and bananas. We've proven we can do that. It's about time we start proving we can operate at a higher level. Not being facetious, by the way, this is true. If we're going to build businesses for philosophy, running shy of time, what do we need to do? My theory, 4 things, very simple. Number 1, build for philosophy. So get the thinking of the entrepreneur right. Get him to start thinking about why are you doing what you're doing, not just what are you doing. Aim for higher than what you're doing. Number 2, we need a strong system of mentorship. This is a quintessential problem, not only here in Namibia, but also around the continent. People who've made it generally don't go back and teach those who haven't made it. And so because of that, you have a continuous disjuncture and disjoint of knowledge assimilation to ability to use it. A system of mentorship. Third, we need a culture of delayed gratification. If it can wait, wait. You don't need that BMW now. It will come. And finally, and this is important, don't write the business plan. Pulu, how many times have we had this argument? Pulu says, no, Vusi, people must write business plans because Pulu's very soft-spoken. Let me tell you something about Pulu you don't know. She's very soft-spoken. She's got a very calm... Pulu is the devil. I'm joking, of course. I love you. But because she's very soft-spoken, you don't then expect her to come at you with such hard wisdoms, and then she hits you hard. Pulu is like fighting Mike Tyson, except you would get into the ring with him and Mike Tyson would be asleep, and you would assume you could hurt him. And then as you walk close to him, you'd get the biggest knock of your life. That's kind of like debating with Pulu, because she's quiet and she looks at you, she takes her time, and then she comes after you, and it's a groot klap. But Pulu and I have argued about this time and time again. Are business plans important? Well, they're important, but they're not critical. My argument is, start the business, write the plan later. Write it later. And the reason I say that is because businesses don't keep to the prescript of the business plan. In the business plan, you make these set of things called assumptions. You know what an assumption is? It's taking knowledge at a point in time, applying it to a scenario at a point in time to create a scenario that suits you. Except that's not the way the real world works. If I created, for instance, these clickers and attempted to sell them, I would make the assumption that I'm the only producer of these clickers in Namibia. If it so happened that somebody could import them at a fraction of the cost, and in my business plan I didn't factor that in, I would have reached a price point in my business plan which doesn't keep to the reality of the business, which means I end up losing my business. Because I'm trying to stick to the business plan. So it's important that people start. Just start. Start badly, make mistakes, figure it out as you go, but start. Willie says, try, experiment, and go through the iterative process, but just start. They're telling me it's time to go. I know. Let me leave you with this. If we know this is what we need to do, why don't we do it? Why is it likely that there are entrepreneurs sitting in this room right now who will have heard everything we've said, and you will go back tomorrow to doing exactly what you did? What is it about the human condition that almost imprisons us to the state of things as they were rather than what it could be. It's two things. There are these cognitive biases that we each as human beings hold. The first is what is called a confirmation bias. So some Harvard professors, and this wouldn't have been a good talk without mentioning Harvard. Some Harvard professors took a group of MBA students about 10 years ago. It was a single group actually, and they split it in two. Each group comprised of 35 people, 17 total. And they went to Group A and told Group A that the sky was blue. They then gave them science and research, 300 pages long, proving to them that the sky was blue. Then they went to Group B and told them the sky was cloudy with chance of thunder showers. Gave them 300 pages to prove what they'd been told. And for the full day, they let them study the evidence as they had given it to them. At the end of the day, they went to the groups and said, what do you believe? Group A said the sky's blue. Group B said cloudy. We're talking about the same sky. The following morning, they took both groups. These are MBA students at Harvard, arguably the top 1% of intelligentsia in the world, perhaps. The following day, they swapped the groups. And they took evidence given to Group A, gave it to Group B, and evidence given to Group B, and gave it to Group A. And at the end of the day, went to both groups and said, now that we've given you evidence that proves something contrary to what you believed yesterday, 35 of you in a group, you're all smart thinkers, what do you believe is the color of the sky today? Is it blue, or is it cloudy with a chance of thunder showers? And without fail, both groups and each and every single member in those groups held the exact same view they held the day before. Because as human beings, even in light of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, told that what we're doing doesn't work, we will continue to do it to confirm our own biases. This is why racists don't see the problem in racism. Because you're asking the human mind to self-critique. It is not capable of that. If it was, you would never fail a test. You would write it and you would mark yourself as you were writing it. That's the first problem. The second problem is what we call the status quo bias. We like things the way they are, you know. It's very nice for us. So, I met an interesting fellow recently. His name is G. Lee Thompson. Told me a fascinating story. It was hard to believe, and then I researched it. Turns out it's true. G. Lee Thompson was the last CEO of a company known as Smith Corona. The gray hairs in the room might know who Smith Corona is. It's for people who were born BC. You know what BC is? Before computers. And so, Smith Corona was the world's largest producer of typewriters. They were a mammoth business. In 1974, there were $500 million in EBITDA. 500 million US. Massive. A young man walked into the corridors of Smith Corona. His name was Richard. He was on his third year running his business. He'd run out of venture funding. He needed some venture funding. They funded him for the first year, then the second year. The third year, they discontinued the funding because they said the project was taking too long, and they said his business would never work. His business was computers. He wanted to create computers for the business world. G. Lee Thompson said to him, human beings don't need computers, but they will always need themselves a typewriter. He told me this himself. The young man who, by the way, he cut funding to, his first name is Richard. His last name, Dell. He created and built Dell computers. Today, the world's fourth largest computer manufacturer. Smith Corona no longer exists. Why? Because even when he knew that there was no ways typewriters would be as intelligent as a computer, the status quo was so entrenched in his head, he wasn't about to change his mind. And this is the fundamental challenge we face in creating a new African narrative, creating a new story, and allowing people to aim for new horizons. We're all thinking at a status quo level. So, back home, I created this little business called My Growth Fund. The idea was to try and help some of the entrepreneurs with whom we work. Because we were working with them erratically, but we didn't have a structure to work with them. Then I realized the real problem with working with entrepreneurs is enterprise development funding. It all goes mainly to the wrong things, and the people who are doing it for themselves for own profit rather than creating impact. And so we're now busy rolling them out. That's why I can share this with you, because the IP will kind of be public in a little while. We went to clients, corporate clients, and we raised funding. And we said to corporate clients, instead of you taking your enterprise development money and putting it in something and maybe doing something with it and having a supply and development workshop later, give the money to us. what we'll do is we'll go into the townships where the entrepreneurs actually are. We'll put up structure in those townships where the entrepreneurs actually are. And we'll license IP and educational material from institutions the likes of Harvard and INSEAD around the world. We'll stream it into a container, and entrepreneurs living in that area can get a card that looks like a Virgin Active card. They can tag in, come into the center at any point in time, have access to internet, infrastructure, technology, and they can do whatever they need to do in their businesses. Not only that, we'll help them register their businesses, get bank accounts, get tax compliant. We'll help them actually complete their books. We'll help them build businesses in the townships where they are. Because what we've done is we forced entrepreneurs living in townships to get on a taxi, then a train, then a taxi to come to town to get help by somebody who does not bother to understand their reality. The thinking is wrong because it's built in status quo thinking. So there's no question that Africa is rising. The only question that holds is, are Africans rising? Thank you very much.